Are we on? I'm getting thumbs up that we are on. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for attending the input session regarding redistricting. This is being video and audio recorded to be subsequently placed online and made publicly available through the State House website. This is not a typical meeting of the House or Senate committees. Not all committee members are here. We'll be starting, and before we do, I ask that you join me in a pledge of allegiance as we conduct this House. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, everyone. As you all here know, but people watching may not, is occurring at the Strafford County Courthouse with the permission of the Superior Court System and the Strafford County Commissioners. Please understand that while we are in this facility, neither the courts of New Hampshire or the County Commissioners of Strafford have had anything with this public input session or the redistricting process as it is underway in the General Court, the House of Representatives, and the Senate. Staff of the General Court has worked to secure places to hold these sessions in each county throughout the state, and I am grateful to the staff and organizations that control the use of this facility for allowing us to be here tonight. Tonight we have members of the House and the Senate with us. I believe that Senator Gray, have you convened the Senate meeting on this matter?
I have.
Yes. All right. And with that, I'd ask Senator Gray to introduce the members of the Senate who are here tonight.
Well, I'll start down there, Senator Birdsong. You want to tell them where you're from? Tell them a little bit.
I am Senator Regina Birdsong from District 7, District 19, which encompasses the towns of Derry, Hampstead, and Wingham.
Senator Rebecca Perkins-Coca. I represent District 21, which is Portsmouth, Durham, Newmarket, and the surrounding counties.
And I am James Gray. I represent District 6, which starts in Rochester, goes up to 11. One thing that I want to mention is there are two committee meetings going on simultaneously. It is not permitted to clap or boo, okay? That's the decorum. We want to make sure that's maintained, and we did have one incident over in the last one we did that. So you will be gavelled if you start to clap or you start to boo. So just so you know. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Gray. On my right, begin your members of the House of Representatives who are with you tonight. Representative McDonald, if you want to introduce yourself and where you're from.
My name is Wayne McDonald. I have the privilege of representing the town of Londonderry, which is Rockingham County District 5. I'm Vice Chairman of the Election Law Committee of the division, and I'm the privilege of serving on this committee.
Thank you, and I apologize for the sound. I just realized the microphone was not on. When people are speaking, if they can turn the microphone on and on this side, maybe slide it around a little bit. That was a complaint. I forgot to have you speak into the microphone. My name is Barbara Griffin. I'm a representative from Goffstown.
Good evening, everyone. Representative Len Turcott, Strafford District 4, which is the town Finance Committee, Labor Committee, and Senior Advisor in the House Majority Office.
I'm Margaret Smith. I represent Durham and in the legislature, and I've done that for about 25 years. Sometimes you need to. And I'm delighted to be here in my county courthouse, and I hope to hear from people in the audience about how they would like to see district lines drawn.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm Lucy Weber from Walpole, also representing Chesterfield, Hinsdale, and Westmoreland. I serve on the Health and Human Services Committee, And I also would like to ask as a preliminary matter, Madam Chair, if there's been any issue of remote participation either for committee members.
No, and if the question could, I appreciate the public's interest in that matter, but there has not, and I do not expect there to be any. I'm not quite sure why the question keeps being raised. It is not a decision of this committee, it is a decision of the Speaker's office. Representative McGuire.
Thank you. I'm Carol McGuire, representing Allenstown, Epsom, and Pittsfield, Merrimack counties.
Representative Israel Piedra, I represent Chester Ward 2, Hillsborough District 9. Thank you for being here.
I'm Representative Paul Bergeron from Hillsborough 29, which is Nashua Ward 2. In addition to serving on this committee, I serve on the House Election Law Committee.
I'm Connie Lane. I represent Ward 2 in Concord. I am also on the Election Law Committee in addition to this committee.
Thank you, representatives.
And
And before we begin, we had an arrival from the Senate since we began. Senator.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm Senator Donna Susie. I represent Senate District 18, Manchester's Wards 5 through 9, the town of Litchfield, the Election Law Committee. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for. Before we get going, I want to take a moment to speak to the overall process. I see some faces that were here at the hearing last week in Merrimack, but I do want to take this opportunity to go through it again. Information on the redistricting process for the House of Representatives can be found on the General Court website. Once there, House of Representatives, then select committees and select standing committees. There's also information on the Senate page. I speak to the House. This is a process to speak to any committee, and one of the standing committees is this special committee on redistricting. On that page, you will find a link that will enable you to email committee members, and also has a website for the committee. That page has additional information on it for the special committee on redistricting. One of the things you will find on that page, among other things, is a link and recordings, and that's where the videos for this meeting can be found from last week, and you'll be able to find them for this week. Redistricting itself is a process that occurs throughout the country every 10 years after the federal census is completed. The population data, the count, is used to create districts for representation at all levels of government. Here in New Hampshire, our Constitution says that the responsibility for the creation of those districts is that of the legislature. And the districts that are redrawn in New Hampshire will be the congressional, the executive, the state senate, the state representative. There is also redistricting for county commissioner districts and delegates to the state party convention. There were handouts on the outside table for you. If there were not enough, hopefully you can share. We had a few more than last week, but I think we might have a few more people than we had last week. So please pick those up if you haven't and they're available. And it will be helpful for you. On the House side, I will tell you to comment on things that you think are important for redistricting in your county, Strafford County, but you can obviously make comments on other districts also. There were sign-up sheets. I have the first one here. We're going to ask people who are speaking to come up to this table to the microphone. We have a camera set up to make sure when we put this online that people can see and hear what is going on. There are a number of people signing up, other people signing up. So to help with the flow of comments tonight, Representative Turcott, who's a representative from here from Strafford, will be up to come and address the committee with your comments. And again, when he asks you to come forward, if you could come to this chair, that would be terrific. I'm going to ask you to identify yourself too, because again, that will help people who are watching the video understand what is going on in the room tonight. Thank you. Representative Turcott.
Thank you, Madam Chair. First one up on the list is Susan Richmond. Please come forward.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Representatives and senators, I live in Durham. Richmond, and I still live
January of 2021, the town of Durham adopted a resolution, and I've been authorized to present it to you, requesting nonpartisan fair redistricting in the state of New Hampshire. So I won't read all the whereases, but I will read the resolutions and speak to them how I see them affecting, not so much the town lines and our representatives, but rather our senatorial district that we've been districted into. So now therefore be it resolved by the town council, the governing and legislative body of the town of Durham, that it urges the New Hampshire General Court to ensure, one, the process of redistricting for the state of New Hampshire shall be transparent, so thank you for this, and open to timely public disclosure and public input in all stages. Well, disclosure, we get to see this, but input, as long as there is not access by Zoom, I know David Cote has not been able to participate because he is medically imperiled by the possibility of COVID, and certainly my elderly neighbors all were standing outside but would not come in. So I don't think without access by Zoom that we are accomplishing having public input at all stages. Is number 2, redistricting shall be designed to provide fair districts that ensure effective representation. I'm a little overwhelmed by Durham, but in terms of the senatorial district, Durham used to have a separate senator, and now is doing a wonderful, able job, but her district is not compact, and she has 2 very large heavily Democratic districts to cover, Portsmouth and Durham. And so I believe this is an example of partisan packing, and that there is not real effective representation of Democrats in New Hampshire when we're all put into one fat district where previously we had 2 senators. Also, this district we have now 21, Senate District 21, crosses county lines. Portsmouth appeals are in Rockingham County, Durham, Madbury, we're in Strafford County, and there are other towns as well, but we cross county lines. And also, as of since 2011, Barrington has joined the Oyster River School District, so now effectively the Senate lines crack our school district as well. And so I think that Barrington and the Oyster River schools lead Madbury Durham in the same senatorial district. Voting maps shall not be gerrymandered to favor a political party, pointing to the fact that I suspect that that is what indeed happened when Portsmouth and Durham were put together. And the town of Durham calls upon both its own elected state legislators and all elected state legislators representing citizens who have held these fair redistricting principles when creating state redistricting maps. So my final comment is, please hold hearings for us the maps once they have been designed. Right now, everything we're doing is in a kind of subjunctive mode, and when there's actual maps to be looked at, there should be similar hearings. But thank you for convening this event this evening. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for your testimony that you have that's written, that you would like to leave. Maybe place it on the table in front of Senator Birdsell, and at the end of the evening, we'll take it all up.
You probably have a copy of this already, but it's
Oh.
a resolution.
Thank you. Okay, next on the list, we have Sue Nastasi.
Hi, I'm Sue Stassi of Rollinsford. I have a Dover mailing address, but I live and pay taxes in Rollinsford. The town votes for 4 state representatives. Our current representatives consist of 1 living
Excuse me for a minute. Could you pull that mic a little bit closer to you?
Oh, sure.
A little more.
Should I start over? Or I'll just,
Hold on one second.
Yeah, you really have to get closer. Otherwise, they can't hear you.
Is there anybody here familiar that knows what the beeping would be?
We'll work on it.
Okay.
Okay, Sue, continue.
oh, that's fine. Okay, thank you. Okay, our current representative is the one living in Rollinsford and 3 in Somersworth.
I'm gonna ask everybody, it's bad enough that we have the beeping, let's wait another minute to see if they can get it under control. I'm informed that people are having trouble hearing the speaker. Dealing with this setup with rooms as best we can, so I'm just gonna ask the speakers, the microphones are really for the recording, so you'll be able to hear it, but if you wanna hear it, I'm gonna ask people to sort of speak up, and for everybody, I'm gonna be very quiet, so hopefully you can hear it. Thank you.
Our town 2020 census showed us at a population of 2,597. I know you will have to combine this with Dover, Somersworth, but these cities are so much larger, it drowns out the voices of Rollinsford voters. I am pleased and proud to be one of the 3 supervisors of the checklist. Serving the town and keeping our voting records exact and up to date has been meaningful. My town is situated on the western bank of the Salmon Falls River, which divides New Hampshire and Maine. It's approximately 14 miles from the Atlantic Ocean. Our neighboring cities are Dover and Somersworth, New Hampshire, and South Berwick, Maine. And I want to thank you, Chairperson Griffin, for allowing me to speak before the redistricting. I hope I will have time after the maps are drawn to add my voice to the debate. I wanted to say accurate representation equals fair maps. Being accurate is for the voters to choose their representatives, not for any political candidate to decide their constituents. Also, being accurate is doing the job elected to do and following the Constitution. When representatives are drawing maps to pack districts, they are not doing their job. Packing, I'm sure you know, but the act of grouping together members of one group within a district to the they are a supermajority in that district. This reduces the electoral influence of the group in the surrounding districts. Executive Council District 2 is an example of packing. And we would appreciate if that could be reviewed more closely on the next drawing of the maps. Work is appreciated by all in the state. So much work is done on your own time. The committee and COVID guidelines have caused increased demands of time, travel, and plain rearranging your life. Please give all voters the confidence that this redistricting committee will do the right thing. And I wanted to say also that the following warrant article was passed on June 8th during the town meeting in Rollinsford by a vote of 406 to 105, the resolution for fair redistricting. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you for your work.
Thank you. Next on the list, Madeline DeSantis Way-Saki. How'd I do? All right.
It's okay if I know the name. Good evening, senators, representatives. Thank you for visiting us in Strafford County. Thank you for letting us address you tonight. My name is Madeline DeSantis Way-Saki. I've lived in Somersworth for 25 years, and I'm here to encourage you to both draw your maps and to come and visit us again after you have drawn said maps. I recently learned that 10 years after the last redistricting process, the public only had 24 hours to react to new maps. And while I appreciate your presence here tonight, there is nothing yet for the public to review or critique except last cycle's maps, which we know includes more than one gerrymander. To really have a robust dialogue with the public and one that creates the most fair outcome, I strongly encourage you to return to these communities that you're visiting after the maps have been drawn for review. In Somersworth, this is important because our ward lines are likely to be redrawn shortly after your maps are drawn. For example, in Somersworth Ward 3 and Ward 5, I think there's a 500-person difference, so that will probably be adjusted in the coming years. In particular, also the council, as has been mentioned, District 2 is the greatest example of a packed gerrymander. There are decisions happening at the executive council level that directly impact my life, but my voice has been diluted because the last redistricting packed Democrats into one district. That isn't just bad for one party or another, it hurts residents. Somersworth has the same as Westmoreland, which is over 100 miles away and bordering Vermont, while Somersworth borders Maine. As I mentioned, I've lived in Somersworth for nearly 25 years. I was married in 2017, we bought a house in 2019, and soon we'll start a family. I'm not the only one. Somersworth is experiencing a boom of families. The next 10 years are going to be pivotal for my life and so many other young families in Somersworth and our surrounding communities. I encourage this committee to keep that in mind, draw fair maps, and come back after those maps are drawn and allow for public feedback. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. Next up, Nate Stewart from Dover.
Good evening to the chair and committee members. My name is Nate Stewart. I live in Dover, New Hampshire, and I've lived there since 1998. So I was around 2010 during the last one of these. I wasn't at one of these meetings though because I was very young. And I think that's something I'd like to touch on a bit in my remarks here, is that I'd like to know what potentially is being done to include the youth of the state in these sorts of considerations. We have a big issue with youth flight from New Hampshire. A lot of our best and brightest go. I think a lot of that is because a lot of people, A, are being priced out of the state, but B, don't feel like their government represents them and doesn't feel like they can have a voice. So I would like to echo some of the concerns about transparency and the lack of having things to really remark upon at these meetings, because we don't have a map, so how can we give our full comments on the process at this stage? Please respect the communities, please respect the natural sort of groupings that there are, the school districts and whatnot. But until there's a map that we can consider, I don't know what good that's going to do, and I don't know how specific my remarks can be. So I'd like to strongly encourage these committees to come back once you have a map, and I'd very much like to comment on it. Another thing that I would like to say is please make sure that you respect majority rule. And please make sure that the districts that you develop are reflective of the true number of people there. Like if you have one district which is wildly partisan, surrounded by a bunch of other districts that are wildly partisan, you're not going to get an accurate representation of the area. It's better to have neutral districts, or districts, again, that are reflective of how things are and not gerrymandered. I feel like there's been a general decay in trust in government and trust in democracy. And I feel like if majority rule is undermined through districting maneuvers, that would only further that decline and ultimately cause terminal harm to our very republic. I think, most people, my generation, most people in the country at large aren't blind to the fact that we just had, not a year ago, an attempted coup in Washington. And that sort of drastic effect comes from years of partisan attacks on the very root of our democracy. I don't trust the government. I don't think many people trust the government, which is why we need transparency and a real input instead of just being given a microphone at a meeting that isn't well advertised and is kind of out a little bit in the middle of nowhere that a lot of people, can't access. The meeting's being recorded, and I know that the chair said that it couldn't be on Zoom because that's the ruling of the chair of the general court, right? But it seems to me that we can't pass the buck. We need to recognize where deficiencies are. We need to recognize where issues lie. And I feel like accessibility is a big one. I guess that's about it. I'll yield my time.
Thank you for your input. Next up, I'm sorry, I cannot read the first name. Last name is Freeman. I don't know if it's Ina, Ivy, Ian.
My name is Ira Freeman. I live in Exeter. And I've come to ask you, each of you, to look in the mirror every day and ask the question, am I for democracy or am I for violence? Because that is the really important question for the population of the state. And when you decide that question, for transparency purposes, you should publicize it. It's really important that the people know what you stand for individually. And in transparency, you have to be really clear in what you stand for. Please vote for democracy and not for bias. Thank you.
Thank you. Next is Maggie Fogarty.
Hello, good evening. My name is Maggie Fogarty. I live at 16 Florence Street in Dover, where my husband and I have owned a home for about 23 and a half years. And as a first-time candidate for public office, I'm running for School Board 1 in Dover, so I'm getting to know my ward and all of the little streets. So the most important message that I want to convey this evening is that the committee, to echo others who have gone before me, must release the draft maps so that the public can see them, input to them, so that the process is transparently demonstrating the kinds of decisions that you're making and the logic behind them, and why one alternative map line would be chosen over another. I want to echo others who have the bizarrely drawn Executive Council District 2, of which Dover is a part, a district where Democrats are packed, giving Republicans a better chance to win the other 4 districts. It seems clear that the design of this district is intended to distort the representation and to favor a political agenda that is being revealed as increasingly anti-democratic. To lift up is the Dover wards 5 and 6 both have populations significant enough to merit their own seat in the New Hampshire House of Representatives. As according to the numbers defined in the New Hampshire Constitution. But instead, these wards share 3 representatives with a Somersworth District 2, which is less coherent and is also unfair to the residents of Somersworth Ward 2 because as a smaller share of the whole, it is harder for a Somersworth person to be elected in a district by Dover voters. I agree with the messages that everything is at stake with how we enact these processes, the integrity of our democracy. So I urge you to be conscientiously transparent and accountable and to allow us to see the draft maps with an opportunity for meaningful feedback. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Representative Smith, is it a question of the chair, please? No. Why don't you address it to me?
Certainly. My question to the witnesses, as I'm look at the
You want to move the mic over.
Oh, yeah, give her one thing.
Thank you. Madam Chair, my question to the witness, as I review the size of each of the Somersworth wards, I see that not one of them is large enough to warrant its own representative, and therefore they have to be combined in some way with someone else. And I see that as a problem that we have to face, just as I see the problem that we have to face that I do not believe that the city of has yet equalized in wards. Given that, and what would the witness expect this committee to do to be able to solve these problems?
Thank you, Representative Smith, for your question. The intent of this meeting is to hear from you, and I asked for the question to be addressed to me because I don't want anybody put on the spot in regards to any sort of questions or information requests. The information regarding all of this is available online, and just to clarify, when we draw House district lines, and that I'm assuming is the district that you're talking about in regards to your own representative, and I'm saying this as an informational piece, we have to stay within county lines, town and city lines, and ward lines. So when a city has wards, and many of the cities throughout the state are not on the same timeline that we are, when the wards are there, they need to be combined with something. So I want to thank the witness for her testimony in regards to the city, but would just point out generally to everybody who might be testifying on cities that wards are a consideration for this committee in regards to district boundaries. Thank you.
May I speak with just one sentence to what's been raised as I depart my chair? Just that I'm coming to understand this process myself and was not engaged in any detail 10 years ago, but I am aware that through, I think it's the Open Democracy Mapathon project, that there are ways of designing maps that take into complexities that you describe. I just want to ask for as much transparency and accountability in the next phases of the process as possible. Thank you.
Thank you. I think one item that this is for everybody, one item that the chair brought up at the very beginning tonight is the website. If you go to the website that Chair Griffin described earlier, you're going to find more information than you've ever wanted to know on redistricting. It's worth a look, and you'll learn a lot by going there. Next up, we have Alana Hunt-Hawkins.
Great. Hi, my name is Alana Hunt-Hawkins. Thank you all for being here and coming to our county today and for working to hopefully draw some fair maps. I live on Old Dover Road in Rochester. I wear a number of hats. I'm currently a city councilor. I'm running for mayor of Rochester. I have no major complaints about currently how districts go. We have 6 wards. There's 9 seats, 3 floterials that work out to 2 wards each. I think that we're very fortunate that it's so neat and that we're not, sharing representation with other potentially unlike towns. When it comes to our Senate district and our executive council district, though, I think people are going to keep bringing up executive council district 2 as something where the shape just doesn't make any sense. And I think that the state acknowledges it and that the travel stipend is higher for that district than in any other one. Similarly, with our Senate district, it's Rochester and then most of the areas north of it. I think that we're kind of grouped in with mostly unlike towns and cities, or both towns. There are no cities north of us that are part of the district. So I think that should be something that's considered in this next round of redistricting. Definitely looking at the Executive Council District 2. And I really hope that we have an opportunity more than the 24 hours that was allotted last time to give feedback once there have been, once lines have been run. And that's it.
Thank you for your testimony, Jerry Cannon.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and august fellow legislative members. And you have an awesome task ahead of you. My name is Representative Jerry Cannon. I represent Strafford County 18, which covers wards 1, 3, 4, and 5 in Somersworth and the small town of Rollins. Versus Elderly Affairs Committee, as well as Somersworth School Board, where I'm running for my 3rd term. The big concerns that we have in the city of Somersworth that I've seen is that challenge our elderly and new people who are recently involved with our legislative voting process is running, and who is running in their ward. It's very difficult when, for instance, this year, all of the people that will be voting for local office are voting for people who all live in the city of Somersworth. But next year, as was mentioned previously, the people that will be voting for all of the representatives that live in the town of Somersworth, they're going to have to vote, consider representatives from Dover, as well as the city of Somersworth. I've been approached by numerous elderly who have been very frustrated when they've gone to find out they can't vote for the people they thought they were going to vote, that their friends were talking about parts of the city, and they were all set to vote for people and find out their names are not on the ballot. I had one of the members of my church, actually, she had a fit at the polling location, and they had to calm her down. So this is the way it is. As a frustrated, because I'm representing the city of Somersworth, in a small town of Rollins, where things are quite different. Luckily, we do have a rep who lives in Rollins, and we work closely with her. But if all the reps that were elected into District 18 were from Somersworth, we would be left out without a representative living in their town. It's difficult for me also when a resident from Somersworth who lives in Ward 2 contacts me to ask them to represent them in their issue. I end up doing that anyways. I also have to refer them to the legislators that are representing their ward, but I'm a representative of my community and I will stand. Lastly, I'm asking you to please plan to hold listening sessions the public to better understand any changes in making to the maps that impact them when they're voting and figuring out who's going to represent them. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Representative. Again, I'll do my best on this one. So, Samira Kalmaida?
There's someone, she's from Dover, Zilmara Kamalida. Okay.
We'll go on. Next, David Hall.
Hi, my name is David Holt. I am a lifelong resident of New Hampshire and a homeowner of 20 years in Somersworth, New Hampshire. I live at 7A Ash Street. Thank you all for coming here and listening to us. I have a few points to make. We need to ensure that everyone has a say in this redistricting. COVID is still an issue, and even if we're not, there's always going to be people who are going to find it difficult to attend meetings such as this in person. We need to have virtual accessibility so that everyone has a voice in the process. We need a say, not just before the maps are drawn. As has been said before, we really need to have to allow everyone to be able to weigh in on what the tentative decisions are on what the districts will be. Part of the reason for this is that we have gerrymandering that is rampant across the country and across the state. We should all want to ensure that our legislators are beholden to their constituents. Is destroying our democracy. Legislators act in their own or their donors' interests because they know the system in place there and like future elections. But there are many issues, and not everyone in either party agrees on all of them. Even those who have gerrymandered to ensure easy victories for the legislators may find themselves subject to legislative votes that affect them detrimentally. One great example that's been brought up many times tonight is the Second Executive Council district, which stretches all the way from Vermont to Maine. This is gerrymandered to the 9th degree. We have a right to fair representation, and this is not it. We have little in common with people that live about 2 hours away. Somersworth and every town and city should have their own representatives. We have no one who is speaking just for Somersworth. I have no problems with our representatives. I highly recommend all of them. We need to have representatives for Somersworth. With the numbers as they're stated, 3,444 per district, we could have 3, possibly 4 representatives in Somersworth. Someone had made the point before that a single board doesn't have enough people to be its own district. But at the same time, I also wanted to point out that these wards are going to be redrawn within the next few years. And they are not being redrawn by the same body. So they will totally disrupt whatever decisions you folks make. So one of the ways to minimize the damage of that is to try to keep the ward districts within the town and give every town or city its own representatives. One of the things that our New Hampshire state constitution requires that the state legislative districts be contiguous and preserve political subdivisions. That was brought up, but to give the same weight to wards to be redrawn by a separate entity is nonsensical. So basically, I just want to emphasize that we need to have a fair democracy here, and what we are getting with the gerrymandering is not that. So again, thank you very much for showing up, And I hope that you will take my thoughts into consideration, and I'll just leave some of my notes here.
Thank you, Mr. Hall. Next up, we have Matt Town.
Good evening, representatives. Thanks for coming and giving us an opportunity to speak today. I really have kind of a progression of points I wish to make. Starts out with the notion that many of the speakers before me have spoken to, and that's the issue of fairness and transparency. This is debated about and talked about, but there are a simple couple of tests, and I'll speak to those as I go through. But the simple test is, can you explain how you ended up with that final map? That test, can you explain it with a straight face? That's the test I would ask for you to analyze and to bring into that process. So, New Hampshire has a history of gerrymandering. It's been shown by several studies of the New Hampshire political reinforcement system. And unfortunately, with this history of gerrymandering, when we look at the executive council stretching from border to border, no one can look at that with a straight face and say that's appropriate. And what does that do to our population? What does it do to our voters when we have to go out there and ask them to vote? So within my town, we had difficulty getting our representative to actually speak to us about the loss of election. The difficulty with that is it really undermines public trust. Given our history of gerrymandering and the redistricting commission that was vetoed by the governor, not once, but twice, that really undermines when you can't say that to the voter and expect them to have a understanding why an independent commission was so deeply harmful. That combined with the GOP chair guaranteed his constituents that they would win the seat in Manchester, and he directly alluded to gerrymandering as the reason he was so confident that GOP would capture the House seat and the congressional House seat. What does that do to public confidence? In the last election in my town, for a select board, not a huge statewide position, I'll give you that, but only 13% of our population voted. Think about that, 13%. So that tells me that people are like, it doesn't matter what my vote is. You folks have an opportunity to take the high road and make sure that this thing is transparent and easily communicated. The consequences, I've spoken to somewhat in terms of disconnect from the voters, and when I speak to the population, I was a candidate this last election, that there is deep distrust, but also deep, lack of knowledge about the problem. We have an opportunity, I should say you have the opportunity now, to make sure that this is well communicated and brought into our town. So my final point with that would simply be that when you get done with this, you should make it a staging policy that this has to be brought before a forum in each individual town. So the representative comes before the town and shows the map, and this is what we did, and this is why we did it. But that has to be in person, in front of the voters. The reason for that being in person is that makes it believable. The difficulty of having this, it's on the website. I'm sorry, I spent a lot of time on the computer. These things are not as easily obtained as you might think. You live inside the website, you know where you're going. And for many of our folks, particularly with the elderly and the harassed young parents, they're not going to go on their website. So if you don't come before the voters person to person and make it real, not yet communicated. So I strongly urge that you hold yourself up as a rep in front of your town and show some courage in front of the voters and explain why you did what you did. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Down, for your testimony. Next, we have Jim Verschneren. Oh, that's you.
So my name is Jim Rashawn, over New Hampshire at 102 6th Street. And I'm here tonight as a former state representative. I just want to say I know that the vast majority of us serve as elected officials because we care about our state and what is best for its people. I think that the extra mile each of you are going for being on this committee is commendable, and I thank you for it. Yours is a sacred trust. Sacred to our democracy, sacred to each of us who believe in the promise of America. I have watched the earlier listening session you held in Merrimack County. Many there testified about the details of the 2010 redistricting, and many exhorted you to operate in a transparent manner and work to create a fair set of districts. I second those pleas. There's no need for me to repeat them here. Others have already and will continue to do that, I'm sure. Yours is a sacred trust. If we as a people are to continue democracy, we must have trust that our votes, our most fundamental right and responsibility, will count. When districts are created to manipulate election results, we all lose. Republicans in gerrymandered Democratic districts may as well not vote. The same for Democrats in Republican districts. When state legislatures become lopsided in favor of one party or the other, unrepresentative of the state, because districts have been drawn to ensure partisan victories, we as a people lose our trust. Many give up on participation, and our democracy is seriously eroded. And so I urge you, both Democrats and Republicans, to set aside your party affiliation, hard as that may be in these political times. Set New Hampshire districts to make them, every possible one of them, as competitive as possible. Yours is a sacred trust. I wish you every success in fulfilling that trust. I will send this testimony electronically as well. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. Next, we have Phil Hatcher.
Thank you for this opportunity to testify tonight. I was in the building for the last 35 years. I'm a retired computer science professor from UNH, and I'm a member of the technical mapping team for the Open Democracy Map Site. First, I just want to mention, people mentioned several towns already, 5 towns in Strafford County, Dover, Summersworth, Rollinsford, Durham, and Barrington, all passed resolutions or warrants asking for a fair and transparent redistricting process. I hope you'll honor those resolutions by running a process where at the end, every citizen of the state will know why their boundaries were drawn. They may not like them, but at least understand why they were drawn the way they were. The Open Democracy Mapathon project last night released maps for congressional districts, executive council districts, and the New Hampshire Senate, which is done on a Zoom meeting, so in a safe forum, citizens can comment on those maps about the process. I think that's an excellent approach. My focus, though, on that project has been on drawing house maps, New Hampshire house maps. As you alluded earlier tonight, this is a very challenging problem. We're working hard on this, and we hope to have house maps for the 10 counties released on October 5th. As you alluded to, there's very severe challenges fulfilling the constitutional requirements. One person, one vote, the requirement in the Constitution that towns of sufficient population be given their own dedicated road, and the requirement that districts be contiguous. Even the definition of contiguous is a challenge for us, I think. Is meeting that define a border, but the Constitution talks about a border. The point of border, I don't know, I'm not a lawyer, And it's an open question, and I'll come back to that in a moment, has relevance in Strafford County. I think some people would like us to think this is a mathematical jigsaw puzzle in which there's only one possible way to put the pieces together. So for instance, Somersworth 2, Dover 5, and Dover 6 in 2011. And happened because, gee, that's the way it broke down. It's just the only way it could have happened. I think people want to think that. They want us to think that. So what I did as part of the map project is I wrote software to automatically generate potential New Hampshire House maps to fulfill the constitutional requirements and minimize the number of towns or wards that are eligible towns or wards that are not given their own rep. It's an algorithmic problem that it's in my wheelhouse as a former computer scientist. So what I want to tell you is there's lots of options in all the counties, in particular in Strafford County. At the end of the day, there's literally tens or even hundreds of different ways to configure the fulfill constitutional requirements and minimize the number of towns that are not given, eligible towns that are not given their own rep as mandated by the Constitution. So it's impossible, in general, to satisfy all of them. That's what the discussion earlier was alluding to. But I believe we should minimize that. I think the citizens of the state expect that from us. And just saying it's too hard to do that is not an adequate response. So Strafford County 2020, let me just back up. In 2010, there's actually 4 towns or wards in Strafford County that did not get a dedicated rep that should have. Those are Milton, Strafford, Dover 5, and Dover 6. So let's look at the Strafford County 2020 situation. You know, as you said, we do not know the ward boundaries. So again, I think the public would like to know, what are you guys going to do about that? In your internal process, how are you going to deal with that? What I did in my situation, I didn't know what else to do, so I assumed the average population for each of those wards, figuring that when the towns draw the wards, they're going to have to do something approximating that in order to get the Secretary of State to approve it. So my algorithm uses that as an input. Other challenges in Strafford County is that there's 3 cities with wards that are actually border each other. They're sort of packed together in a corner of the county, which makes it particularly challenging. What my software tells me, we can do the map for 2020 with only 2 violations. If we exploit, as is exploited in the 2010 map, connecting New Durham and Strafford, a lot of people don't like that. So what do? You know, the Constitution says that every eligible town should be given its own rep. And we can do is that point. Does that point stand up to legal challenge? Is that the border? The alternative, according to my software, is you can do it with 3 violations if you don't allow meeting at a point. Also, I want to mention David Andrews' alternative component method, which I believe, again, he's actually the leader of the technical mapping crew at the Democracy Mapathon Project. I believe he presented this to you at the Merrimack listening session. My software also uses this approach as well as the conventional component method. And I believe using that method, we can build a map for Strafford County with only 1 violation. Take a close look at that and have legal authorities take a look at that. To me, it's a small tweak to the component method that was discussed in the Supreme Court decision. I'm not a lawyer, but let me tell you, with that approach, it will help in Strafford County. But now we get to the real meat, which is, what are we going to do? I'm claiming, I'll be happy to share my maps with people who are interested. I'm claiming there's tens, if not hundreds, of possible ways to map Strafford County. Which one are you going to choose? Okay, earlier tonight, it sounded like you were saying, we can't do anything. That's the best we can do. That's not going to be good enough. Okay? There are trade-offs, however. As I said, we could get it down to 2, allow districts to meet at a point, but a lot of people don't like that. What are we gonna do? Also, some of my maps are gonna have large flaterials, which also happened in 2011. And large can be measured in various different ways. For instance, number of precincts, wards of towns that are combined together, or even number of flaterial seats that you end up with. Do we not like that? Do we want to keep city wards together? In this discussion in Somersworth, should Somersworth be kept with Somersworth as best as we can? Should Dover be kept with Dover? Should Rochester be kept with Rochester? Is that a priority for us? And then there's the whole community of interest idea. We have lots of choices, folks. We have tens, hundreds of maps to choose from. Okay? We're going to use community of interest data, such as school district boundaries, to sort through those alternatives. So my question is, what are your criteria? Can someone raise this at your working session? And it was claimed it's just a mathematical problem. That's all it is. I'm here to tell you it's not just solutions. You're going to have to choose one from those solutions. How are you going to make that choice? I think the public should know what your criteria are. Okay. Also, at your working session in Concord, Joel Anderson presented his tool that the committee has at their disposal to work on this problem. It shocked me at that meeting that Joel actually said that he had a database of solutions. So I'm not the only one saying there's more than one solution. He said part of that tool is a database of solutions. We should see those solutions. I know you say there's licensing problems with this software. I think the public should understand. I would like to have a public statement exactly what are those licensing problems. But no matter what the problems are on the software, the database of solutions should be released to the public. For instance, it help people like me understand how good his tool is. Is he providing you with a complete set of possible solutions or not? Moreover, he has 4 counties he said he hadn't been able to get to work. I've got solutions for Strafford County. He didn't have it. Maybe he's fixed his tool now. Maybe it's working. I don't know. And what does his tool do about ward boundaries? How are you using that tool? He has to have made some assumption about ward boundaries. I think it'd be good for the public to know what that is as well, if you are truly using this tool. So let me just point. My point is that there are a lot of solutions for mapping counties for New Hampshire house maps. You need criteria to sort through the possibilities. You should discuss that at a public session so we can see what your thinking is, and you should publicize what those criteria are. Again, I'd be happy to share anything that I have. There's no licensing agreement on my software. I'm happy to share whatever you want to see with it. The only data it takes as input is the same as Joel's. It takes populations, and it takes the, which districts are adjacent to which districts. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Phil. Jack Gale is next.
Thank you, Senators and Representatives, for this opportunity. Jack Gale from Barrington. Stories about Strafford County. I'll share a cautionary tale from the south of the border. It's not going to be about Elbridge Dairy. You all know where that term came from and what he did in the 18th century. This is about Carol Clevitt, a representative of a town in Chelmsford, Mass. Border. 37,000 people. We had our own rep. Intersection of 2 federal highways, well-off, good school system, all things that communities aspire for. And for the longest time, they had their representative on Beacon Hill. In the last round of redistricting, closed, and very political process there that probably only could happen there in Massachusetts. They got the wards. And and citizens of Chelmsford, where I lived, had to go to 4 different places. We had 4 different reps, all from other towns. Nobody from those districts could run because you were only a small portion. Towns 1/4 of our size had representatives and a precinct from our town. It upset a lot of citizens in our town, and it wasn't the only location where it happened. Despite what's on my shirt, I voted for Carol. She was a good rep, attentive, listened to her community. She was a Republican in Massachusetts, a rare bird. And of course, she lost her seat. Concerned citizens decided to look into the process. They got it opened up, freedom of information laws and stuff. And they found on the rock some very ugly things that happened. Not accusing this on this committee at all, but concerned citizens who really didn't understand this process opened it up, and it did not go well for some of the people involved. I would recommend a website, Google, and you could look at the end of the career of Thomas Finnery, a very powerful man on Beacon Hill. It got ugly for him, and he lost his position. There were political decisions made in the redistricting in 2010. It's not going to happen here. If you measure up to the ideals that you set forth in the process and do what the citizens behind me ask for, it shouldn't be a problem. But if more than 60 cases were brought after November with no evidence, I hate to think what would happen if the citizens decided that this wasn't done fairly. I wish you success and hope you can honor the ideals of this process that you have before you. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gill. Nat? Is there a Nat Gerding? Okay, no Matt Gerding. Let's go next. Representative Schmidt. Welcome.
Good evening, colleagues. Since I may not be around 10 years from now to weigh in, I feel obligated to add a couple of views with regard to the citizens of Dover and Somersworth. You've already heard some of this, and the acoustics being what they are, I'm not sure that I heard any of it accurately, but some of the people seem to make quite a bit of sense that I can hear. But the situation is one that I hope will not be maintained or repeated. And I joined the suit 10 years ago to try to change that because what was done was not proper. I talked with the Secretary of State about 10 years ago and showed him the numbers that the ward realignment in Dover had produced. As you know, the Supreme Court has not said that every entity has to be exactly equal to every other one in terms of population. You just have to get as close as is workable and practical. And the Secretary of State, Mr. Gardner, said at that time that the ward realignment process in Dover had produced was perfect, to use his words, because Dover has a population that breaks down in 6 wards to about 5,000 per ward. And that's what they had. Each ward had just a few more, a few less than 5,000. And therefore, under the contract, every one of those wards was entitled to a representative of its own and taking 2 wards together to have a floatarian. I represent wards and have for the past 19 years. Wards 1 and 2 per ward, roughly. to take the others 10,000, so Constitution, that would be that would be 3 reps for wards 1 and 2. And that's what wards 1 and 2 got. And wards 3 and 4 are very, very similar numbers, and they're entitled also to 3 reps. That's what they got. Wards 5 and 6 you've heard referred to already several times. 5 and 6 had essentially the same population as all the other wards in Dover. Were entitled to 3 reps. But specifically, Ward 5 was entitled to 1 rep of itself and 1 floatarial rep. Right? Ward 6 was entitled to 1 rep of itself and 1 floatarial rep. And that's not what 5 and 6 got. They got put together with Somersworth 2. And the 3 reps that wound up getting elected from that district, I believe it's Strafford 17, they got elected at large. That's not what the Constitution calls for. That's one of the reasons I joined the suit. That's not what the Constitution calls for. It calls for 1 from 5, 1 from 6, and 1 from 5 and 6 together. But instead, they got this lumping together with Somersworth 2. Now, if you look at Somersworth 2 and 5, and wards 5 and 6 in Dover together, from either review, they 6 and Ward 2 lie next to each other, but they don't have any real contact because there's a Bullen Pond and a forest and so on. It's not like some of the ward lines in Dover where Ward X is on one side of the street and Ward Y starts right on the other side of the street. They have that's a neighborhood, they have a real connection. But I protested against that situation because in addition to the inequity that I've always spoken to, you have a situation where, given the workings of the election, you might have all 3 representatives be from Dover, or all 3 would be from Ward 2. And then the first time, and I think the second term under that regime, you had all 3 representatives from Dover. Therefore, Somersworth 2 representatives had no representation that they were technically entitled to. Fair, that's wrong. I don't want to see that happen again, and you folks have some authority together that ends that situation. That's unfair, and now, in the last couple of years, we've had one of the representatives from District 17 be from Ward 2 in Somersworth. But his loyalties, if you will, are kind of divided too, because he doesn't just represent Ward 2 in Somersworth, he represents 5 and 6 in Dover as well. What does he know about 5 and 6 in Dover? He doesn't live there, there's no natural interaction of the populations and so forth. Now, the ward realignment in Dover, as it was done 10 years ago, was very conscientious. I wasn't on that ward realignment board, so I'm not patting myself on the back to say it was done extremely conscientiously and competently. And the result was so close to 5,000 awards that, as I say, Secretary of State argued, when looking at it, he said, "Oh, that's perfect." Of course, perfection is not required. It was a characterization, not a mathematical assessment. But it didn't work out for wards 5 and 6, and Somersworth 2, and it shouldn't be done again. Of course, I also have some objections to the districting that was done with regard to the executive council. That was clearly a gerrymandering. Never should be done that way, and it shouldn't be permitted to continue with that district that Dover is in, and it's connected by one town in the middle. You could do better than that, and I hope you will. So I think there was a question with regard to the Dover situation from Representative Smith earlier on, and she has not been enlightened by what I've had to say. I'll be happy to try to answer the question.
But otherwise, thank you very much for your attention. I certainly hope the microphone works well enough in terms of the recording so that I can listen to everybody else's remarks and figure out what the heck they actually did say.
Thank you, just for information, thank you, just for, on my phone, I'm trying to text to see how things are going. I am informed the live stream is coming through loud and clear. So I expect that anything that goes online, you'll be able to hear quite well.
Right. And one other thing for the edification of all of you, I sit in front of one of these microphones in the gel car, as Senator Gray, on a regular basis, and you have to get right up so that practically you're taking the bite out of it, because when you were speaking before, Madam Chair, you were up here and the mic was down here. I just couldn't understand whether it was English or something.
Well, they say that whether I have a microphone or not, so.
When you speak up like that, we can all hear you. The mic don't help.
Okay.
Thank you, Representative Schmidt. Representative Janet Wall. No? Okay. And then we will move on to Representative Timothy Ford.
So I am Representative Timothy Horrigan from Strafford County District 6, which is the towns of Durham and Madbury, or as I like to call it, Greater Madbury. We're one of the districts that claimed closest, that came for 5 reps, and actually it looks like, judging by the numbers I got from the Census Bureau website, we'll be pretty close to a fraction percentage point for next time, although the first 2 terms we were put in with Lee, community of interest, we're part of the same, the 3 towns of Durham and Madbury are part of the same district, and you absolutely are allowed to take communities of interest, such as school districts, into account. Just about the numbers, which brings me to my first point is there's going to be a lot about what a reasonable deviation from the other numbers 3,448, and the towns and city boards of the state have numbers all. They're not all exact multiples of 3,448, so that makes your life a little tougher. Constitution, there's a constitutional amendment that was passed in 2006, really been obeyed, which says in addition to districts having to be contiguous, each town, each city ward is entitled to its own member within, it says something about reason, if reasonably practicable. So it is reasonably practicable, but we will probably have to use a larger deviation than plus or minus 5%. And that's been represented in the committee. I heard that when I viewed the YouTube of the original organizational center. That's not necessarily true. We can have a higher deviation. Just means we have to finish the plan quicker. We have to send it to federal court. It'll have to go to federal court. Even the state house, the state senate districts are within the purview of the federal government. But they probably would approve a plan with a higher deviation, especially since our state constitution pretty clearly states that if a town should that have their own rep. It's not just a question of maximizing the number of districts, as was said 10 years ago by the then majority leader. It's you need to maximize the number of towns that have their own rep. And I didn't bring it with me. I won't bore you with it. I did actually make up a plan. I didn't have a mapping did it on a spreadsheet that did a pretty good job of that. But there was when you get to the it's on the corner. The county, it is pretty hard to keep it within plus or minus 5%. So the district I came up with was the 3 towns, New Durham, Middleton, and Milton, and I think it was 13% off. Everybody else was like within 0 and 6% off. I don't said too much about that already. But you absolutely can use a bigger definition. Vermont has about the same ratio of residents to state reps, and the plan they used for the last 10 years was
I think vary from, some districts are 10% off their ideal, others are up to 10%, so it's like a plus or minus 10% or 20%, and their plan passed constitutional muster, so the feds did not overturn their plan, so we can, and they have more flexibility because you can divide municipalities in two, and you can divide them into two pieces in Vermont, where we have to, we can't draw lines across municipal town or ward boundaries. And I also think it'd be a good idea, even though it's not required in the law, not to draw too many districts across city lines. Try to get certainly what was Reverend Smith mentioned, where they stuck Dover and part of Dover, part of Somersworth, did me. I think that was not a good idea. I mean, the members who were elected all served both cities and the town of Rollinsford with distinction, but it would have been better not to have a district that was partially Dover and partially Somersworth. That just, in my mind, made no sense even. And another issue, contiguity. We mentioned the so-called Mirsky bow tie district, which is Paul Mirsky, the Representative Griffin's predecessor 10 years ago, was famous for his collection of bow ties. Where those two towns met at a point deep in the woods. You had to drive about 20 miles to get from one town to the other. And I understood just fiddling printed map and spreadsheet, and now understood why he did it in terms of the numbers, but that's to get an acceptable plan. You can put Strafford in with another community. I actually find that you could even put it in, for example, with Rochester, because so there are other things you can do with Strafford other than sticking it in New Durham. There's there's like at least one other blatantly district in the state in Belknap County whose meeting hasn't happened yet, but there's a district that's Guilford and Meredith, where they meet out in the middle of Meredith Bay. You have to drive about through 3 miles of Laconia to get from Guilford to Meredith. I remember like the chair at the time said, well, it's just a short drive across the weirs, which is true, but that was not a contiguous district. It should not have been drawn that way. And actually, even Representative Perkins Book has said his district is only contiguous in the loosest sense of the word, since Portsmouth is separated from the rest of the district by Little Bay. I mean, there is a bridge which has been renovated in the past 10 years, so there is like it's not hard to drive or even walk or bicycle from Dover to Portsmouth or from Durham to Portsmouth. Our district is technically, it's contiguous in a fairly loose sense of the word. So, my other talking point, the software. We haven't heard much about the software. Apparently, some sort of software either will be acquired by the committee or is being acquired. What I heard, just listening on YouTube at one of the previous meetings, it seemed like a very, very vague answer. They went on about how difficult it was, how there's licensing issues. I interpreted that to be no, we're not planning to distribute it, but that's a decision that could be changed. There are, in fact, amidst the Open Democracy Mapathon, they're using just one of the many open source public domain mapping softwares that are out there. So you can easily put together an open source software package that respects the ward and city and town lines and allows for flotarials. It's actually the actual drawing the plan. It's a very complicated issue. It's a good thing you're having all these hearings, but actually the actual nuts and bolts of drawing the plan probably are not as hard as you think. 8 years ago, I actually drew up my own plan because the software as a contractor for that time was eventually released to the public, so I still had it 2 years after the fact. And I took me only like a couple of days of work to put together a plan, which was, probably not as, it was just, obviously I thought it was fine, not that everybody was thinking, but it was actually sit down and decide how to draw the plan. It's not actually going to take you that long to do it. It's not quite as complicated as you're probably going to represent it as being at this point. And finally, my last point, I made a lot of points already, is please get the plan out in time. First of all, get it out in time. If you take my advice and go with the larger deviation, please put out enough time for the state and federal courts to actually review the plan, because they're undoubtedly, no matter what you do, there will be lawsuits. And so put it in town. Also, put out enough time so people who are thinking of running office know where their district is going to be. Last year, I was in Durham, and that was the only thing I had to worry about is whether or not Lee was in my district. But there's a number of
there's lots of people out there who are thinking of running for House seats, who don't know where their district is going to be, especially if you think you're running for the executive council, or even for the state senate, U.S. Congress. There's lots of people interested in those offices, and they're totally at a loss to figure out like where exactly you're going to draw the lines. So if you draw the lines a little bit sooner than we did 10 years ago, that would, I think, be a really nice thing for you to do for everyone involved. And I know this is a very complicated job, and no one's going to be pleased with the result no matter what, although it wasn't that terrible last time. In fact, the chair was actually, the House side is very fair-minded. He carefully drew himself a district. He was a conservative Republican. That was he immediately lost in 2012 to a liberal Democrat. So thanks a lot for your time, and good luck with this whole process.
Thank you, Representative. Is it James Fleischer?
It's James Fisher. Funny spelling, but it's still Fisher. I'm not running for office. I'm not a representative. I'm not planning on being a representative running for office. I'm just a normal citizen. I'm also a retired physician. And I happen to live in Dover, and I pay both Dover taxes, and in the back of my property, I pay Madbury taxes because that part is in Madbury. And so to discover that I share a district with Somersworth on the other side of Dover is kind of a shock to me. And I'm really not sure how one representative could fairly represent Somersworth and my part of Dover at the same time. It seems, well, it's kind of like buying fish. You know, does it pass the smell test? And this just doesn't pass the smell test. And I think that's my concern tonight. That's probably the message I want to bring out to you, is that whatever you do, and listen, I'm no expert in politics. I really don't care about that. I think most people don't care about, I've been practicing for a long time. Most people don't care about that either. They're kind of like me. They want to see if it passes the smell test. And so I have 3 asks of this committee. I'm not going to tell you how to do your job, although why you wouldn't want to pass this off to some independent group so they take the heat, I don't know, but that's up to you, not me. My first ask is that at the end of the day, when you finish the process, do the districts that you've drawn, does that accurately reflect the geography, the politics of the state? If the state is evenly divided into Democrats and Republicans and independents, do the maps reflect that, or reflect a bias towards one group or the other? And that's important because of my second ask. We've seen certainly this year, we've seen an insurrection at the Capitol in an attempt to overthrow an election. We've seen our National Congress unable to come up with decisions to get the country out of debt, to move forward in some of the things we need to move forward on to become competitive in the world. And worse, we've seen neighbors fighting against each other because our representatives have secure seats. They have a sure thing. They don't have to answer to all their constituents. They only have to answer to the constituents that they want to answer to, that they've selected when they've decided what their district is going to look like. And therefore, the idea of compromise, the idea of working out is no longer something that we're interested in this country. We're only interested in satisfying our own constituents. So one of the reasons I moved to New Hampshire well over 35 years ago is because this is a state that values representation. This is a state where neighbors actually take care of each other.
I have respect for each and every one of you. I think you're all here, some of you, you have to mind your own party. I understand all of that, okay? I can deal with it. But you also really care about this state, and you really care about your neighbors. And the only way that I can see as a physician, as a citizen of the state, that we can come together as a nation, but certainly come together as a state, is if we have districts where people actually have to talk to each other, have to work things out, so that one group doesn't dominate over all the rest. We may not agree on anything, but we've got to be able to agree, and we're not even able to do that. And gerrymandering isn't the whole problem, but it's part of the problem. And it's a problem that you actually have a chance to fix, that you can actually do something about. You can send a message to every citizen in this state. At the end of the day, when you've drawn up your maps, when you've done what you think is the right thing to do, and it has to pass the smell test, and you can say to every member of this state, we care about you, your voice is important to us, but we also want you to talk to each other, to talk to your neighbors and value your neighbors, because that's what New Hampshire is about. And to draw district lines to separate people from the nation is only going to make the problem worse. So my second ask is, please, well, I guess it's the first ask too, if you think about it, pass the smell test. My last ask is that you give us time to review what you've done at the end of the day, not just 24 hours, but let us look at it. The people that have come before me have already said, they want the ability to say, to be able to be looked in the eye and say, this is why we do it the way we do. And we tried to be as fair as we could. I trust you. You're our representatives. But I also want to thank you for all the work that you do. Some of you have come a long distance to be here, and I appreciate that. And I wish you luck, and I thank you for the opportunity to come.
Representative Peter Bixby.
Good evening. For the record, I'm Representative Peter Bixby, representing Strafford District 17, which represents 2 wards in Dover and 1 ward in Somersworth. And I'd just like to make a quick part 211 of the Constitution. When a population of any town or ward, according to the last federal census, is within a reasonable deviation from the ideal population of 1 or more representative seats, the town or ward shall have its own district of 1 or more representative seats. Skipping down a little bit, in forming districts, the boundaries of towns, wards, and unincorporated places shall be preserved and contiguous. So I like Somersworth, but I don't think it's fair that I am representing people as a resident of Dover. I am representing the people of Ward 2 in Somersworth. I think that they should have a dedicated representative that covers their ward and probably one other ward in order to balance that ward, as opposed to being tacked on to Dover. It so happens that there is 1 representative from Ward 2 in Somersworth at this point, but typically anybody who is running from Somersworth is going to be a disadvantage against anyone who is running against 2 wards in Dover. So it is set up to essentially not represent that ward in Somersworth, and I don't think that's appropriate. And this is one instance of this that happened in the last redistricting. There were a number of others. I think Hudson and Pelham probably have even more to complain about than Dover than Somersworth in this case, because Pelham is smaller than Hudson and basically gets Hudson representatives because of that. So I really would urge you to pay close attention to that idea of making sure that any district that is large enough for its own representative gets one. And also pay attention to the requirement that boundaries of towns and wards be respected. And I recognize that the way numbers work out is not going to be perfect, and that's why we can help do that further balancing. And so that's the main thing I'm here for. I would also like to urge, as a number of people have also done before, that when there is a draft, that map is published soon enough so that there's a chance for hearings and public comment, and that those public hearings should be made accessible to remote access. So that all close, and I wish you good luck with this fairly complicated process. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Bixby. For those in the audience and around the table, we are on a pace to finish right around 8. We have 5 more individuals who are, oh, all right, well, I have 5 more on my sheet, and a couple more after that, I guess. Next is Emmett Soldati.
Thank you, representatives. Thank you, senators. My name is Emmett Soldati. I hail from Somersworth, which is the smallest, the tiniest city in the state of New Hampshire. It is so small that it probably should be a town, and it actually was a town for much of its history, except back in the 1800s, the Great Falls Manufacturing Company, a textile mill company that built the mills, decided that the townsfolk were not doing enough to serve the corporate interests of the Great Falls Manufacturing Company. And the CEO of the Great Falls Manufacturing Company came up with a brilliant idea in 1890, and that was to turn Somersworth, then Great Falls, into a city. And by turning it into a city, they could split it into 5 wards. And fortunately for them, many of the folks in the wards did not speak English. Most of them spoke French because they were French Canadian. And they were able to identify enough people in these 5 wards that were sympathetic to the corporate interests of the Great Falls Manufacturing Company. And they were successful in 1893, Somersworth, then Great Falls City. And they elected 5 representatives against the 4 at-large representatives that were very sympathetic to the corporate interests of Somersworth. Which is the nature of my remarks today, is that I think as much as the folks before me have spoken about making sure that our electorate and the citizenry that elects them feels confident in the political making, I'm also concerned about the economic representation in our state. You've heard a lot about Executive Council District 2. I had the good fortune of running as a candidate in Executive Council District 2. And Representative Weber has probably heard enough people from Strafford County mispronounce Westmoreland. And that's an apt way of thinking about why we should draw maps that represent our communities where we actually know the towns and the people that are there. Because if you don't have connections with a community or a region, then how are you expected to represent the people there? To get elected in those regions with no connections unless you have financial resources to do so. And so by drawing fair maps, what we are actually doing is tipping the balance of favor against resources into community resources. So that folks who have access to their community have relationships with their community, whether it's by being active in their local church community, being active with local nonprofits or food pantries, or being a business owner that has served their community. Those are the kinds of social capital that can allow people to run for office in regions when they otherwise might not have deep pockets or backed by special interest groups. And so I asked the committee today to consider that fair maps not only means that these districts are being represented by a good spread of the values and political ideologies, but also allow people to run for office and get elected to represent their communities
based on those connections and not just based on their pockets or their ability to send a lot of glossy mailers across the state, even though they can't even pronounce the cities and towns with which they represent. I would echo the sentiment of many folks before me, as members of the public to review these maps, to identify indeed if we think they represent the communities of our SAU districts, of our public health regions, of our business communities, and other types of regions with which we associate. And in closing, a neighbor of mine, Jules Good, could not be here today, and I just wanted to read her remarks, sort of double hitting. This is from Jules Good, a neighbor of mine in Somersworth. Some of the people who will be most impacted by redistricting do not have an opportunity to share their perspectives tonight, which not only limits government transparency, but also stifles important discourse. People who do not have transportation access, people who cannot physically access this space, and people who work outside of regular office hours are disadvantaged when we eliminate a remote testimony and attendance option. In order for the redistricting process to be truly fair and transparent, these listening sessions must have a remote participation option. Jules Good, Somersworth, and disability rights activist. Thank you, members of the committee. Thank you for your testimony. Isaac Epstein. No, Isaac. Okay, we'll move on to Parker Cook. Joe.
Hi, everybody. My name is Parker Cook, and I represent myself on a political organization. I think one thing I've learned from sitting here is that in a city of 33,000 people, this room can up roughly 45 people is all we have here. And I don't think because we don't care as a city or as a community, because after we count our votes, we have jobs, we have families, we have a busy life, and we put our faith in you folks that when we're not looking, you folks interest in mind. That not only, we don't believe that you'll agree with you folks all the time, but we hope that your faith and your loyalty, above all else, is to just and durable democracy. And I find my faith a little bit shaken when I look at, I know it's been talked about already, but the Executive Council of District map. Tomorrow morning during breakfast, I'm going to show my 5-year-old daughter a picture of that map. And I'm going to ask her, which one doesn't look like the rest? And I think everybody here knows which one she's going to point to without putting down her toes. And so all I really want to say is that at the end of this process, I just want you folks to be able to say to yourselves that, yes, above all else, above my party or any other interest, I've contributed to our democracy. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Parker, for your testimony. Next, Representative Welper.
Thank you. For the record, my name is Representative Kurt Welper. I represent Strafford District 3, the towns of Strafford and New Durham, one of those infamous districts that is connected by a point. I have to represent both towns here, so I'm going to do that in very short order. Strafford has population 3991 according to your map, and has enough population to warrant its own rep, and we want one. Currently, we have two shared with New Durham. New Durham does not have enough population for so they have to be married to somebody else. And they really might be married to Strafford because Strafford and New Durham are such similar towns. They have similar space and geography, and they operate quite differently, but it makes a great district. Problems in one town, problems in the other. Everybody understands each other. It works out great. And I wish you God's grace that you go forward.
Thank you, Representative Welper. Nancy Kirkholm.
I am Nancy Kirkhunt. I have resided in Madbury since March of 1993. I'm coming here to say that we want to have a voice. Madbury has a population of 1,918 people. We share a school district with Durham and Lee. And we are so small that our representatives are combined, as Representative Tim explained, with Durham. That doesn't mean that we're not important. In fact, we are the keepers of the water supply for Portsmouth and Dover. And so I'm just asking you to make sure that despite our small size in Madbury, that our voices count equally to other people. In addition, I would like to talk about my work that I do. As a result of being a member of the Madbury United Church of Christ, we made a decision about 20 years ago to share our building with the Maranatha Indonesian United Church of Christ, which was at that time a fellowship. It joined our denomination as a result of our sisterhood in the church. That brought me to also chair the New Hampshire Conference United Church of Christ Immigrant and Refugee Support Group. And in that work, we have seen many immigrants go through the asylum process and gain citizenship. And so as you are going through this process, I would like you to think about, as I think Emmett Soldati also said, the spectrum of the populace, to make sure that we are hearing the voices of new Americans. We're often saying to ourselves, oh, we need some new blood around here, some new voices. Well, hear them. Make sure they count. We like to think of ourselves as just white here in New Hampshire, and that's not the case anymore. So open your eyes and make sure, please, that you include everyone's voice. The small towns, the new Americans, anyone who's not in your stereotypical New Hampshire idea. Include them. Thank you.
Thank you, Nancy. Former Representative Dave Bickford. David Bickford.
I'm from District 3, and it doesn't really work out very well because we may be connected by a point, as Kurt Walton just told me. However, when I was a state rep for that area, I had to go through 3 other towns. It takes me almost as much time to get to my next district as it did to get to Concord, where I live. So we don't really know what the other town is doing. It's like Emmett Soldati just told us. We're just not connected. Even though there's a point that connects us, we just don't go that way. It's just Class 6 road that connects out that way, and nobody uses it. The bridge is out. So if you could, in your deliberations, consider the ordinance to get us there. I was a state representative for 16 years. Back in, I think it was 96. Does that sound right, Mike? Thank you. I was coupled with Milton, and that worked out pretty good. They're about 7 miles away. And then we had multiple districts, and that was very difficult, probably worse than what we have now. I think I'd rather stick with Strafford, go back to that. And that's really all I ask, is to try and take that into consideration when you get. I understand the difficulty of the job. And so I want to tell you, I've been waiting 10 years to tell you that.
Thank you. And I believe this is our final speaker, Heath Howard.
Hello, thank you for having me. My name is Heath Howard. I live in Strafford. I ran for state representative in Strafford 3, towns of Strafford and New Durham. As you had just previously heard, Strafford and New Durham are really connected in the most contiguous way. Of course, when looking at the economics behind the connection between Strafford and New Durham, far less connection than between New Durham and Farmington, as it seems the lifeblood of that town, where a lot of the businesses are set up around it, as well as Kings Highway a little bit further north is another population center in New Durham, which goes and connects through Middleton. It takes me 40 minutes up to New Durham whenever I leave and I'm going out trying to get there, and I have to drive to Belknap County. When that same trip, as previously stated, it would take me to Concord. Strafford has the population to have its own state representative, yet it doesn't. And we're linking it with New Durham simply because New Durham is culturally similar. Yet, when looking at everything comparatively, New Durham is far more similar to Farmington, Middleton, and Milton than it is to Strafford. And it makes far more sense to put them together based off with geographic location. As well as the fact that they share a public school, any public safety resources, community services such as religious services, and youth sports. So it makes no sense why they should be in a district together and why New Durham should be put with another town in Strafford to be left on its own. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anybody else who did not sign up that wishes to speak? Come on.
Can I display the maps that we came up with?
You may.
So I first wanted to talk a little bit about...
Before we begin, just state your name and where you're from, please.
David Andrews. I'm a volunteer with the Open Democracy Map-a-thon group. And since we are in the tip of the dragon, I figured I would talk about the Executive Council map. As you can see, District 2, which many have talked about, is clearly gerrymandered. What we have displayed here is the number. So the red arrows display the high school SAUs that are broken up by this map. The green arrows are where county lines are crossed. So you can see, I believe there's 19 high school SAUs that are broken up by this one district. And as high school SAUs are community of interest, I believe that we should try to keep them together at all costs. So as a organization and reaching out to the community, we went through a mapping process that actually concluded last night for the congressional, the executive council, and the Senate maps. So what we did was we went out and tried to find the most important communities of interest to the people of New Hampshire. And what we found was that school districts were very important to people. Shared emergency services, so shared police, shared EMS, shared fire departments were very important. Proximity to hospitals was very important. And then poverty, drug use, that kind of thing. So we use those to kind of define our communities of interest. We then created criteria for each of our maps. So following the Constitution first, so population deviation needs to be low. everything needs to be contiguous, and town and ward lines should not be broken up. We then added our own criteria based on input from people in the group. So we wanted to preserve communities of interest. For executive council, we wanted compact districts, and we wanted to preserve county lines as much as possible. And so what we came up with using those criteria was this map. Well, we came up with a number of different maps that were voted on by a group of citizens, and they came to the conclusion that this was the map of the maps that were presented that they liked the best. And what you can see is that only 3 high school SAUs are broken up. The districts are a lot more compact, and they make regional sense. So you can see there's a northern district, a southern district, a central district, a seacoast district, and a western district. And you can tell, you can just, between these 2 maps, you can really tell where and one is not. That's not always the case. You can draw maps that are very gerrymandered that look like they're not gerrymandered. And it's very important that you look behind the curtain and make sure that even though it may, I know a lot of people have said that it needs to pass a smell test. You can't conduct a smell test by simply looking at a map. You can come up with a number of different maps that are gerrymandered that don't look gerrymandered. I've accidentally done it myself. So what I would do is, when I was doing my mapping, I wouldn't really look at partisan voting. But at the end, I would make sure that I didn't accidentally gerrymander and create packed districts of either Democrats or Republicans. So this map here currently is a very fair map in a partisan way. There's a couple lean districts, and the one district is very, very fair, which will swing either way on any given election, which is what we want. We want the people to decide who their electors are. Yeah, so I think that's all I wanted to say, and thank you for your time.
The committee will get copies of all the maps that we've done at the next Grafton County hearing. We're working on the preparation of those, and they will include the charts that compare.
Mr. Beal, could you identify yourself?
Oh, sorry. I'm Brian Beal, Deputy Director of Open Democracy, and the organizer of the Mapathon project. So we will have charts and graphs for you as well. So coming to a hearing near you. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Turcott, for conducting the hearing. I want to thank everybody here for coming and speaking. I want to thank the last presenters here for the maps. I was online checking. I am told that the site is live to upload maps, at least today, so that can start. So be aware again to the redistricting for the House on the general court apparently homepage, and the House and Senate pages also. You can submit testimony online through those websites, so you can do that. And as you've heard tonight from our last witnesses testifying, there are free programs out there for doing districting. I know there's District Builder and a number of them. The census data is available online. I want to thank people tonight for some of the specific information that they gave us. And I think with that, we are done with the House. Senator Gray, did the Senate want to add anything?
Yes, normally the Senate doesn't allow, charts and stuff to be brought into the hearing rooms. We prefer that you give the handouts to the end. I didn't say anything about it tonight because I'm sure that you people didn't understand that. The Senate website is up. The Senate is up for accepting all of that. And if it is provided through those email addresses and stuff, it will be posted on the website so that everyone will be able to see it. But again, a lot of times when you charts up, you block the view of the people behind you, so they can't see it, and they can't see why you're presenting that. So that is part of the reason why we prefer the handouts to, charts and stuff that you would bring forward. And with that, I'll close the Senate part of this hearing.
Thank you, everybody, for coming. Senator Gray, did you want to?
Oh, Senator Perkins spoke up there.
I just had a procedural clarification, if I could. Chairwoman Griffin, you mentioned that if you did want to continue to make the comments to have Zoom input to these meetings, that was properly directed to the speaker. So could we expect that we would receive a response from the speaker?
May have been pointed out, and I'm sure you were aware in the Senate hearings, there were some substantial Zoom testimony, and it is not practical at this time to be going forward. Additionally, we have that do not have access the way we do in the southern tier. So the decision at this point is no. If the Speaker's office issues something differently, I will let people know. They are aware that there are outstanding requests. And that is the situation at this point in time. So thank you. I'm glad we could clarify that. I would think for the last time in regards to these hearings. If something changes, I will certainly let everybody know. And House members, I have a piece of paper for you might want for mileage before you go. Good night, everybody. Thank you for coming.